Welcome back to the Purpose Driven Movement podcast. I'm your host, Tarek, and today's episode is a really special one because while this is officially episode 51, we're taking a moment to reflect and celebrate a major milestone, 50 full episodes of this journey together. What started as a simple idea to explore the deeper purpose behind movement, performance, health, and mindset has turned into something far bigger than I could have imagined. And that's because of you. Whether you've listened to just one episode or have been with us since the beginning, you've helped build something meaningful. Along the way, we've connected with inspiring experts and passionate guests whose voices have left a real mark. And the support from you, our listeners, has made it all possible. From thousands of downloads to a global listenership, heartfelt ratings, and genuine feedback, the impact of this show has gone beyond what numbers can explain. I'm also very excited to share that as part of our growth, Purpose-Driven Movement will now be a video podcast. You'll be able to find the video version of the episodes on YouTube. You can find this episode and future episodes in video. Such an exciting upgrade. To mark this milestone, we're revisiting moments from some of our most resonant conversations with guests like Sam Merza, Ian O'Dwyer, Anna Milani, and Whitney Jones. Their insights have helped shape what Purpose-Driven Movement is all about. And today, we're bringing together a few highlights from these standout episodes as a thank you to you, our amazing audience. So this episode is a celebration, but it's also a thank you for listening, for sharing, for being part of this purpose-driven movement. Let's look back at where we've been and get inspired for where we're going next. Let's dive in. Welcome everyone to another podcast on the Purpose-Driven Movement show, and this time with my good friend and also mentor, Ian O'Dwyer. It's a pleasure having you on the show once again. Ian, how are you doing?
Great to see you, Tarek. Great to be back, mate. I'm doing well.
Yeah, I'm getting a bit jumpy. I need to sort of settle myself because there's so many good things to talk about. A lot of facilities now are wanting to put in, cold plunge, hot plunge, cryotherapy, you name it, right? Anything from those large items to smaller components of what constitutes recovery. So
let's understand from the very get-go one thing, that what we're talking about is stress. That's all we're talking about. It's stress. How do I take stress out of the body that doesn't need to be there? We need stress, nothing to be scared of, but we need eustress, not distress. Eustress is stress that improves mental acuity, improves the ability for the nervous system to heal the body, to help the body perform, to make better decisions, to have oxygen flow and so forth. Distress is what now shuts the body down, which is what creates fight, flight, freeze, or faint. Distress is something that will detract from the tissues of the body and will actually affect performance. Realistically, we're talking about stress, and we're talking about, Tarek, the environmental stressors. So you where you live, I where I live, beautiful sunshiny day here. We've had lots and lots of rain. People have been getting stressed because everything's been so wet, and all of a sudden you have mold starting to grow in a tropical area, which is normal, but mold growing in houses. Kids are struggling to get to school without getting damp and wet. Colds, all those sorts of things start to happen. So there's stresses because simply of the weather. Now that stress has an effect on the person. And the interesting thing is if we talk about an environmental stress, if someone gets distressed, the first thing that happens is they stop breathing. Now, if they stop breathing, the autonomic nervous system kicks in and you go into freeze, fight, freeze, faint, or whatever it may be. So you're in a scenario now where you don't breathe because of the stress. We have 20 litres of fluid that has to flow through the body. So if we go back one step further and we look at the components of the body: nerve, 70% water; muscle, 70% water; bone, 30% water; skin, 70% water; fascia, 70% water. So in those 5 components, there's a fair bit of water. But we haven't spoken about the other 2, which is blood, 92% water, and lymph, 96% water. So without these 2, these 5 don't function. So if we've got 7 tissues that require a bucket load of water to move, because if it doesn't move, what will happen is the fluid will now stagnate. So in other words, if I think about it, just put a vision in your head, Tarek, that I've got a river that runs from my feet up to my collarbones. And that river is 13 to 14 litres of lymph, 5 to 6 litres of blood. So 20 litres of fluid that starts in my feet that has to come all the way up. So you think about it, comes through the ankles, bony structure, up through the calves, meaty structure, through the knees, bony structure, through the thighs, meaty structure, through the pelvis, bony structure, through the gut, meaty structure, through the chest, very bony structure. And if you think about that river that runs up either leg and runs up into the collarbone, if every bony structure is a narrow part of the river, if a tree falls into a narrow part of the river, what's it going to do to the fluid flow? It's going to restrict it, right? And it's kind of funny because when we start looking at lymph nodes, there's a lymph node that's about 50 mil above the malleoli, the inside of the ankle bone. It's about 2 inches, 50 mil above it, a little bit higher. There's a lymph node about a hand's width above the crease of the back of the knee. There's lymph nodes in the crease of your groin. There's 70% of your lymph is in your gut. There's a lymph pump that sits at the base of your rib cage, and your lymph ducts live in the collarbone area of your trunk. So it's interesting, mate, because everywhere there's lymph nodes, the joints below tend to swell when they don't flow. And that inflammation causes pain, discomfort, and potentially disease. So when we talk about recovery, what we're really talking about is, can we get the tissues of the body to extrinsically and intrinsically recover to a state of original health and wellness and performance? And can we do that by decreasing the amount of stress? And when I mean stress, if I go to a recovery center, and I'll use me as an example, who spent 20 years in cold water and ice for 30, 35 minutes a time, you put me in an ice bath, I will, mate, there'll be some stuff coming out of my mouth, and I can tell you, right, you won't want to cup it. Because emotionally, I am going to be stressed because I know how much it used to hurt for that time frame. Now, we know the research says, now 2 to 3 minutes tops is the ideal time, but we had loads of time in there. So your body was numb, and you got out and moved like a robot. No wonder the fluid wasn't moving, right? So we've got to understand that if we're going to give some sort of recovery to reset the tissues, the stress levels in the body, firstly, we need to understand, what does the person actually enjoy? Do they want heat or do they want cold? Do they want wet or do they want dry recovery? Because you can do dry recovery. We could use whole body vibration. We could use percussion. We could use breathing. We could use mobility. There's so many things we could use without even getting wet that is really effective.
How do you determine those preferences?
Really simply, mate, is Phil Soma has developed a lifestyle questionnaire, and it's 5 questions based around nutrition, hydration, movement, sleep, and mood. And if you ask the 3 questions per of those headings, it will give you basically a score out of 1 to 3, 1 being poor, 3 being great. And if you get a 1 in any of those scores, you need to address it. Are you dehydrated? Have you eaten? Have you slept less than 5 hours? Just simple things, right? That will dictate where you need to go first with your application. Do I need to address some things before I start? Because if I don't, if I'm dehydrated and I'm going to give someone a high intensity session, I'm probably going to be in a chance that I may injure the person, or they won't perform well, or they won't be able to recover from the session well. So that's the first thing we do. The second thing I would do is, as I've always done for 30 years of coaching, I ask my clients, now, this is how the start of your session could look. We could use a foam roller, we could use a percussion gun, we could do some breathing, we could play a game. Which one would you like to do for the next 3 minutes? Wow. Imagine that. Imagine asking rather than telling, Tarek.
That drives up the engagement. That's wonderful.
Oh,
Always ask this question: if there's one thing that you'd want to see changed in the industry, call it fitness, wellness, health, in and around what we've discussed, perhaps, what would that be?
Be more inclusive. You train the human being, not the human body.
Seek Ian out, because he's really at the forefront of this, him and his team. And you can always hit us up about that. And until next time, Ian, keep up the great work.
Hey, what, mate? Thanks, Tarek.
My guest today is Sam Merza. Sam, who heads up Total Fusion as the National Fitness Manager, as well as the Business Development Manager. Sam's got a really rich tapestry of background as, of course, a personal trainer, and then moving into management, where he's done a stellar job really steering this incredible brand called Total Fusion, which is Australia's largest health, wellness, call it, you can't even call it a gym, but facility in Australia. And it really, par none, the best I've ever seen as well. So Sam, how are you doing today anyway?
I am fantastic. It's lovely to be here. Thank you, Tarek. I really appreciate your time and having me on.
What do we really mean by longevity and wellness, and in light of this year and beyond, Sam?
For most people, as they're moving through, they're thinking about the now, maybe the next 5 years, and they may not be thinking about when they're 60 or 70, which are also really vital times. Like for most people now, when you retire, you might still have 30 or 40 years of your life left to do something, especially those that want to retire a little bit early, right? You work really hard, you've put together your family unit, and then they've kind of grown up and moved out, and now you're 50, 55, and what next? And people are, forgetting about the next 40 years sometimes of their life. So when we talk about health span, it's, can you, I guess, function and operate at optimized health like a 30, 40, 50-year-old when you're 60, 70, 80, and I guess onwards being functionally fit and healthy. And those things are becoming really important to people right now. So from a longevity perspective, that's probably what it looks like. From a wellness perspective, there's two elements to it, right? There's the physical health and there's the mental health. And there's spiritual health as well, I guess, when you look at it holistically. So those all play a part, and everyone's fed slightly differently by those elements and by those, I guess, attributes they're looking for in their personal journey.
The way that I've really understood it, and even more so in light of the mental skills stuff that I've been working on with the coaching room and our new program called Mental Skills Training, is that if you've got an athlete or even an individual who's not a professional athlete for that matter, rather than just focusing on the process, is that outcome needs to be attached to a higher purpose. For example, you want to be able to play, tennis with your son or your daughter, and that means, that's your greater purpose. Then your training, your process of training, and that maybe that discomfort potentially in that process will become so much easier because it's attached to a greater purpose. A little bit of pain or that discomfort, whether it's an ice bath or swimming underwater and you need to hold your breath a little bit longer or what have you, is what is that attached to?
Yeah, and the great thing about anytime you have one of those events, which is whether it's type 2 fun or just normal fun, whenever you put yourself under that challenging situation or you achieve something, obviously we all have felt it, but you get that dopamine rush, right? You get your catecholamines, you get that feel good hormone neurotransmitter release, and you're like, I feel good. That was satisfactory. And one thing we're always kind of drilling down to people is that, I don't know if you've read there's a book, The Slight Edge, which is like a fantastic book I really, really rate, which is essentially, the concept's fairly simple. It's, you do the 1%ers every day. Now, if you do it, you're not going to become a multimillionaire, or you're not going to become ripped with a six pack, whatever it is, overnight, right? But if you don't do it, it's also not going to break the bank. You're not going to get bankrupt tomorrow. You're not going to be obese tomorrow. So the 1%ers in and of themselves, you're not going to see a change instantly overnight. But if you continue to do that 1%er every single day, there comes a point where you get to that tipping point and you have that kind of exponential growth curve, because all the 1%ers add up, and then boom. And it's the same in relationships. It's the same in anything. If you go home and you kiss your wife every night, you're not going to be the happiest person in the world, but you'll have a nice long marriage and it's going to be a really good place. If you go home and you don't do that every night, at some point, along with all the other stuff that goes into it, you might find yourself distanced from your wife to a point where you're like, we're not in love anymore. So it's that concept that 1% is in every part of your life, build up, build up, build up, build up. And at some point, there's a tipping point where they make a real difference. But every time you set yourself a goal, you achieve that 1%, and whether it's an extra glass of water every day, whether it's an extra 10 seconds in the ice bath, you get that success, you get that dopamine hit, you get that, that release of your feel good hormones. You're like, yes, I achieved something. And what we really want to do with people is create a positive cycle to success with their health, with their well-being. And habit is a really tough thing to change, right? So if I'm asking someone to go from not exercising at all to training 3 times a week and doing cryotherapy 3 mornings, then doing red light 3 times before bed and doing a sauna here, suddenly they're so overwhelmed. Weigh your food. Who manages to weigh their food successfully long term? It's really tough to do. But if you just set in those small things to do and you just build it up, then it becomes a positive cycle where they see a win and they find themselves benefiting from this experience as opposed to failing straight away. And that's something that from my, I guess, career in this industry as a PT, as a manager, as developing parts of the business is everyone, whether it's a client, whether it's a staff member, thrives when they see small wins happening every day. And that doesn't, change the world overnight, but at some point, that part of the business or that part of someone's life is in such a good position that you can sit back and look at it and go, wow, there's a massive difference that that person's achieved just by putting together all those little bits along the way. And so I think as we grow as an industry and we're growing more into the healthcare sector, like everyone in the industry knows that we're almost like the first line of defence for the Australia, obviously, the Medicare system in the UK for the NHS. There's so much stress on these systems from avoidable disease, or I guess minimizing risk disease. Obesity is a simple example that our division can help with. We want to be at the forefront. We are moving away from group fitness spandex back in many moons ago through to a really kind of dynamic, health orientated, holistic approach to someone's overall care, to a point now in the Australian market where we're talking about hopefully getting touch woods, fingers crossed. I'm not sure it's going to happen, but they're talking about the gym being a tax deductible part of your rebates every year, because it's should be cornerstone of health and wellness, both mental and physical. So that's where we need to consider ourselves, is as the experts, to then drag the industry through to there. And the more people playing in that space, the better. So sometimes speaking to even smaller, boutique centres, we're speaking about the industry as a whole, individuals running a garage gym, etc. They're worried about too many players in the market. We know it's a saturated market. We've heard it before. But the thing to consider is if you Google obesity rates, if you Google, cardiovascular conditions, if you Google diabetes, the numbers are continuing to rise, right? We know that we're getting less healthy. So there's so much potential upside to having more people in this area. We shouldn't feel like we're cutting and stealing from each other. Unfortunately, we've had 16 to 20% of any population has a gym membership, depending on which state you're in, which country, and it's kind of generally between 16 to 20-ish% of people have a current gym membership. So we go, yeah, but there's loads of gyms. We're competing for that 20% or 16%, whatever it might be. Well, yes, that's true, and that's a challenge. But there's also a large 80% piece of the pie, which we might be able to attract if we position ourselves as experts in health, in wellness, in longevity, in mental health combined with physical health. If we're better at doing yoga, if we do hot and cold exposure therapy, all those different modalities, whatever we choose to use in our facility that we can actually provide, might bring in one more person, 1% from the ether who aren't currently engaged. So I think there's so much opportunity in this, in this area, in this industry, for more people to do amazing things. And the key to getting it right is exactly where you are in the industry and what you guys are doing, which is the education aspect. And that's something which is obviously emerging and is becoming easier because of podcasts, because of social media, because of YouTube. But the education aspect is going to be vital over the next few years for the individuals in that area to position themselves at the forefront and have proof of product. It's like as a PT. I could tell you how great I am. Hey, everyone, I'm a fantastic PT. But unless you have testimonials or evidence of what you've achieved, people have every right to doubt it.
Right, Sam, one final question I'll ask before we wrap things up is if you could change one thing about the health, fitness, wellness industry from your perspective, in today's from today's perspective, what would it be?
My initial gut reaction was to try and, I guess, stem the tide of incorrect information. But there's a but in this one. Any information which drives people to try something that they wouldn't normally try in a positive way, so not peer pressure in a negative way, but peer pressure in a positive way, is good information because you have an opportunity as an expert to set the record straight. So I know that the industry is littered with all sorts of, and I'll use the example from back in the day that I've always used, was like 6-minute abs was a thing at one point, right? Do this test and learn this about yourself, and then take this supplement and everything will change for you. Get so much energy, or have a cold shower and you're now going to lose 20 kilos. Like these things aren't the best information because they're not accurate in some ways. There's levels to these things. However, the more exposure people have to information relating to whether it's, completely accurate and it's fantastic information, whether it's drink snake oil and that will make you, feel a lot better. It gets them started, gets them thinking, gets them researching, gets them talking to a professional. And once they talk to a professional, they're going to be in a better place. And they're going to be able to make the right choices once they've had the right information.
So Sam, really, it's been incredible having you on, and appreciate you sharing your insights, your perspectives.
Absolutely. Appreciate your time and appreciate everything that you are doing, but also appreciate everyone out there in the industry who's just having a go, trying to help people. I think it's a great place to be and it's a fantastic industry to be in. So look forward to many more adventures together.
Welcome to another wonderful episode on the Purpose Driven Movement podcast. Had the great privilege earlier this year of meeting Whitney Jones. I loved hearing about Whitney's story, really powerful and profound, especially in the health, fitness, wellness space. Welcome to the show, Whitney.
Thanks so much. So happy to be here.
As you've competed and you sort of won these titles, what were the main transformations? Obviously, physically, there was that, but did you find that it evolved into something even more deeper for you in terms of what you got out of the process?
Definitely. Growing up, we always had that fear. So it's like when you're a child, it's what do you want to be when you grow up? And we come up with outlandish ideas and we dream so big. And then as we get older, society, friends, family, no, you can't do that. And they tell us why we can't achieve those dreams or why we can't do something. Well, what that does is it plants this fear in us as human beings. And fear can be the biggest deterrent of all of your goals and dreams in life. And so I realized, earlier in my adult life that I had all these fun ideas or things I wanted to achieve. And it was like, oh, but I don't want to fail. So fear to me was something that I ended up deciding, I'm going to just take this head on. Again, I got into a sport I have no experience doing. I wasn't a gymnast growing up. So I get into this sport where you got to do all these gymnastics tricks and skills. And I'm like, what? Okay. Now I knew I was a daredevil. So I was like, I want to brace this fear and do things safely, but I want to try things. And if I'm going to learn and I'm going to test myself, then you got to embrace the fear. That's one thing that helped me, not just as an athlete, but as a mom, as a business leader, as managing my teams, taking on risks in business endeavors, being able to look at it and break down, okay, where is my fear? What is it that I'm really afraid of? And I would physically write it down. And then I would think, what is the worst case scenario? What would happen if the worst case scenario? How would I feel? What would happen to the people around me? Would that change the way people perceive me? Once you break it all down, it's always pretty silly. The one thing it's not is like if you're doing crazy daredevilish risks and skills, which I did do some of those too, and those all didn't always work out. But when you look at what it is that's scaring you, that's holding you back, that is this massive roadblock from you stepping over that line and getting to where you want to go, it's the one thing that you can look at and go, okay, it's really not that bad. And then you got to think, what if things worked out? So yeah, look at what if it didn't work out, worst case scenario, but what is the best case scenario? What if it did work out? What if that risk you took, what if that thing you're facing that's so fearful actually worked out? Perfect. Well, then it starts going, yeah, I don't want to live in this what if world. I want to do it. So it's a process of talking your brain through the stages of fear. And it's actually a big part of what, I wrote my book, When Broken, which you see kind of behind me. And that has multi-purpose. Obviously, I've broken a lot and I've won, but it's not just about breaking bones in your body. It's about breaking your spirit. It's about having these setbacks personally, professionally. How do you win when you're broken? Well, there's a big part in here about fear, because when you learn to embrace fear the proper way, you're unstoppable. And the whole philosophy behind When Broken is there's people in life that are just going to survive, and then there's people who truly thrive. What's the difference between these two? Well, the people who are thriving, they've mastered the art to win broken. And the truth is, we're all a little broken. Once you realize it's a level playing field now, all right, now I want to be the one to really push forward and see what I'm capable of and see how I can level up in all the areas of my life. And facing the fear is one of the biggest things you've got to conquer.
I always ask the guests, like, if there's one thing that you'd like changed or about, health, fitness, and wellness in your case, what would that be?
Just getting people moving more. And like I said, sadly, it is such a reaction that people have, and they're not being proactive about it. And so, you look at these people who it hasn't been a priority until it must be a priority. And at that point, that's where it's really sad. We always want to, feel good, have good range of motion, like just wake up with energy. But if you don't put the work into it, it's not going to happen. You get older, it becomes even more important. So at the end of our days, we work so hard to retire and then travel the world and have fun. Well, what if you work so hard, you finally retire, but you have so many injuries and it hurts to walk around and you have so many health issues. You can't fly across the country and go on the dream trip to Italy. That's living. That's what you've shot for your whole life, but now you're not healthy enough to do it. You don't have the functionality and the fitness level to walk around, and enjoy this vacation. For me, if I could change anything, I would want people to just move in whatever fashion that makes you happy. You love pickleball, or you love running marathons, you love swimming, you love shooting hoops with your friends. Whatever it is, just move. Experience what we all were given from the get-go and never take it for granted.
It's incredibly summed up there. And I totally agree with you on that. And thank you, Whitney, for being a wonderful guest, and your insights and wisdom. I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, Anna. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Hi, Tarek. Great to be here. Yeah, I'm doing well.
This notion of dual tasking, which is very important to cognitive fitness training, do you want to just unpack that a little bit more and what that entails and why it's important?
Absolutely. So dual tasking means literally doing two tasks at the same time. Okay, both tasks can be measured at the same time and they can be performed independently. Now, I just want to unravel the misconception about dual tasking, multitasking with dividing your attention. Okay, so a lot of people, or a lot of the misconceptions before was like, multitasking is very bad for you, is very taxing on the brain. Okay, what people mean by that is that doing two tasks with the same stream of information, yes, that's exhausting on the brain. What I mean by that, if I'm paying attention to you right now, but I'm also scrolling my phone, which I'm not doing, by the way, that would be tiring on my brain, because I'm constantly switching my attention from looking at you, having a conversation, and then scrolling my phone down. So vision and vision. But if I'm talking about doing a physical task while I'm doing a visual task, now that's cognitive motor. Yeah. So it's two different streams of information. So it could be audio and physical, or it could be vision and physical, for an example. It also could be vision and audio. But specifically cognitive motor is a physical and a cognitive. So what does that mean in simple terms? If you're at the gym with us, we may get you to do some strength exercise. Maybe you're doing squats, lunges, push-ups. And at the same time, maybe you're working with some simple reaction lights. You're tapping away some lights. Okay. Now I could make the task even more complex. I could all of a sudden assign a different color for a specific task. So I could say, hey, Tarek, when you see green, I want you to jump and then tap the light. When you see blue, I want you to hop on one leg. When you see red, I want you to do a push-up. Now, all of a sudden, you're having to pay way more attention. You're having to memorize the task and associate it with the action. And you have to react to it and process it as quickly as you can. So there's a lot more happening in the brain. And the reason this is more powerful for the brain as opposed to doing the task separately is because your neurons are connecting and working much harder, and neurons that are involved in different networks. So this is essentially why dual tasking is more powerful than doing, as an example, Sudoku and puzzles separately. It's not that they're bad, absolutely not, but they have as well a different effect. And the reason the one thing I really want to emphasize is that as we age, our dual tasking ability slows down, typically. That means we may be walking and we find hard to maintain a conversation with someone. Yeah. Whether if you've never noticed that, I see that with some of my clients, they struggle to answer questions. They have to stop. Then they look at me and then they answer and they continue. So we may struggle to avoid distractions in a car when we are driving. So driving becomes harder. So all these kind of things are aspects of our daily life that get impacted by us essentially getting slower at dual tasking. So this is why dual task is really that important, to be able to live a functioning life.
And important to that, as you said, is that the associated task needs to be connected. So movement with an instruction, whether it could be a change in the color of a light, would be an aspect of dual tasking specific to, let's call it, fitness. And as the Hebbian law goes, cells that wire together fire together. So that makes perfect sense what you shared. A consistent question that we ask our guests is, if you could change one thing about, the health fitness space that we've been discussing, what would that be?
Wow. Wow, are you sure?
Pick one.
I love the discipline of bodybuilding, but not just for the sake of it. So I think, just moving towards a bit more health conscious way of doing fitness. Look, at the end of the day, whatever motivates someone to exercise is still good, but looking at not just bodies, but really bodies and minds and brains and souls and linking it all together. That's one thing.
Thank you for your time, your precious time, Anna, and your wonderful insights into cognitive fitness training. Hey, fitness enthusiast, can you please do me a huge favor and leave a review or rating, subscribe to the podcast, or share with a friend? These little acts make a huge difference in keeping this show going. Thanks so much.